Hi, good evening. Tonight's video is a little bit heavier topic than maybe you might want to talk about, but it's one I think is really, really important, particularly for my channel. As some of you know, I would assume if you've subscribed a long time, I've often hit the topic of Christian wifely submission, meaning I believe in following the scriptures that say a wife should obey her husband. And quick disclaimer, I've said it a ton of times before, but I do believe that she is not to follow him in a sinful action. But in general, the Christian scriptures call for a wife to obey her husband. And it does not mince words about that. And I think many people in our culture ignore that. However, I've talked a good bit about that in the past, and it probably still bears more conversation. But tonight I want to talk about something on the flip side of that I think is super duper important. And that's when not to submit. What if a wife has an abusive husband or somebody who's causing her and her children to be unsafe in any way? And particularly I mean physical, but of course that can also extend to certain mental abuses and things. I do not want to say whom, but I have had family members who have experienced abuse. And I do not think that it is sinful for a woman to get away from that. And in fact, I strongly encourage her to do so. I don't think that the good Lord wants us to hang around and take beatings all the time, because that is not a godly way to be. Now, we as wives are not responsible for our husband's actions and choices. Those are his choices. They're his choices to make for good or for sin or whatever he chooses to do with his life and his time. His thing. You are responsible for yours. And yes, I do believe in general you need to submit to your husband. But if he is crossing lines and harming you and harming your children, I don't think that you're expected to hang around and take that. I do think sometimes women will twist a normal, good, godly relationship because maybe they want out of it and start seeing everything he does as abusive or something. I have seen that happen, and I know you might come back at me and say, oh, you're just taking and twisting that, but it's easy for anybody to twist things, and we have to be honest with ourselves. But if in an honest situation and a guy is just being really cruel, especially if he is harming physically his wife or his children in an inappropriate way, then get out of there. I don't think that you have to stay and take that. I believe in that biblical relationship, but that is not a biblical relationship. So you have to see the separation. And many people over the years have kind of assumed that I think it's okay to be a mousy, beat up woman. No, I don't. They tend to look at the extreme. What we need to do is definitely be the submissive partner as part of the headship order. But again, you do not have to follow into sin, and you do not have to take abuse. It is perfectly allowable to go and be separate and have a separation. I'm not going to get into the topic of divorce and remarriage or anything, because that's an entirely different issue with an entirely different doctrinal study, and there's going to be a lot of people with different opinions on that. But I have no problem with a woman going and remaining separate for either a time, for safety purposes. Maybe clear heads need to prevail with a little bit of time apart, and maybe things can come back together. Counseling can certainly be a useful and appropriate tool at times. I would recommend a Christian one, but that said, there are times when maybe a woman may need to remain permanently separate. Now, on the flip side, I also believe that it's entirely possible that a man can be abused. And sometimes that's even physical, because sometimes, a lot of good men are trained never ever to lay a hand on their wives, and as they shouldn't. But sometimes wives will take advantage of that and literally beat their husbands. I think more often than not you see situations of them berating their husbands and being cruel and domineering and things like that. That can go both ways. And when I tell wives that we are supposed to submit to our husbands, I am not trying to say that you should get beat up physically or mentally. The whole headship and submissive order of things is meant to be done in a godly way. Now, grant you cannot control your husband in his actions, and it's his choices and how we respond to him. And the Bible talks about how a believing wife can even help her husband become saved by her, basically her loving and forgiving actions and her good example. Paraphrasing there in my interpretation of it. But my point is people often take and interpret things to extremes. And I certainly have my own views taken and interpreted to extremes that I don't mean. We need to be careful about that. And I think it's important that I be exceedingly clear right now. I do not support or condone an abusive relationship. Now, like I said, I have had family members who have gone through such things, and I've had quite a few friends, particularly over the last few years. It seems like I've had more and more that have had to have breaks in their marriages for one reason or another, either an unfaithful spouse or maybe their spouse turned out to be more abusive than I ever knew, and that breaks my heart for them. But I don't suddenly cut them off and shun them as evil sinners because they had some kind of separation. And I think sometimes maybe people think that I would do that. No. I do think if it's possible, it's important to encourage reconciliation if it be possible. There are some cases where it is not, and if a husband is beating the ever-living tar out of his wife, I don't think that's a good idea to go back to him. You need to get to safety and you need to get help. I do not have numbers or anything like that or a list of that to post, but I think most of that can be found pretty readily online. If somebody wants to post that kind of stuff in the comments, feel free. But in general, I know that most states and counties and stuff have domestic violence shelters where people can go and get help. I know that it's actually harder for men because there's usually not very many places like that they can seek refuge. But in general, especially for women, there is help out there. And I don't think you're wrong if you avail yourself of it. I'll tell you what spawned this video. I had a friend this year who, I don't want to say how I knew her because that may kind of be able to be traced back to her. But basically she was a model Christian wife from the perspective that I seen. She was kind. She never said anything bad about her husband, which I think is a good thing. We shouldn't be speaking negatively about our husbands. But that doesn't include if you need to seek out for help. There's nothing wrong with getting help. And in her case, she never said a word, and come to find out, he had done some really cruel things to her, including starving and just constantly berating her and just some really awful stuff. Never once did I see her utter the first negative word. And while I think and commend that side of her, that she was trying so hard to be that loving Christian submissive wife, I think it was taken too far. I think it was good intention, but she shouldn't have had to stay with a guy like that is that cruel and hurtful and literally causing her physical harm. That's not okay. And if you are in a situation like that, and perhaps you're watching my channel for encouragement on how to be a good Christian submissive wife, I encourage you to be a good Christian submissive wife, but I encourage you to get help if you need it. I hope this video has blessed you guys tonight. I just felt like it needed to be said. I hope that I'm not being misunderstood. I know I often am. It's just the nature of YouTube. But I hope that you guys can understand and see where I'm coming from, that I don't condone that stuff. And I do think there are times that it is absolutely appropriate to get help. And you can still do that in a godly and submissive manner. We don't need to go bashing and spreading our business all over Facebook. But in the same turn, I think it's very important that you consider the physical and mental safety that we need to continue and to be able to live our lives and follow God's will in our lives. Pray carefully over whatever you do. And if you need prayer, feel free to always post and ask for that. I am not an expert. I am not a counselor. And I have just no expertise in these matters. I have a wonderful husband who I am very blessed with, and he has never laid a hand on me. And he is always sweet and loving, and I have no experience with being abused in any way. However, again, I have seen friends and family go through those situations, and they're very sad. So I encourage you, if you're in that situation, get help. If the church will help you, by all means. I know some churches won't. Some take a overly harsh view on these things, which I don't think that's right either. I think we need to find balance and literally ask ourselves, what would Jesus do in these matters? You need to seek the scriptures, seek the Holy Spirit, and seek God in prayer. And there's nothing wrong with getting away to a safe spot to do that. So again, I hope this video blesses you guys in some way, and that I've been pretty clear in trying to convey my intention and my heart on this. Have a blessed night.